Hello and welcome to another edition of The Old Shop. It's the very last day of March. I've been putting this video together for a few days now, so I hope you'll enjoy it. What we've got this time is a walk in Acorn Wood, which for some reason the sound didn't work, and so I've had to speak over it, which I hope will be alright. And we look at the Blackthorn blossom down the lane a few days ago, and then again today I've videoed again, and you can see the transformation in a few days. The front garden, which I'm really pleased with, and I also have put together a rather horror story, I'm afraid, but it's a kind of part two of how I came to be here. It's not the full story, there's more to come, but I thought I would split it up into a few sections because otherwise there's a bit too much dereliction, which you'll see in today's episode. But this time I'm looking at having come here and what happened next, basically. So anyway, wait and see what you think. I'm really sorry that you see adverts in front of these videos sometimes, maybe every time, I don't know. I don't like adverts any more than you probably do. I don't get any money for the adverts either. It's not that my channel's monetized, it's only a tiny channel. But unfortunately, I've looked into the small print and I've got no way of turning them off. You have to actually be large enough, ironically, to be monetized before you've got the choice of not having adverts. And you can then, there's a thing you could toggle. But I can't do that, so I have no rights over it, and so I don't get any of the revenue, but the adverts are there. So I'm really sorry about that. All I can ask you to do is to tell lots of people about it, so I've got enough subscribers, and so I've got the choice, and then I can switch them off. So that's that really. But I do really regret it, because I would much prefer them not to be there. I think as I say, I looked into it, and I think it's been well over a year they've been able to do this. So, it's out of my hands, unfortunately. Apart from that, I hope you enjoy it. For a New Beginning by John Donahue. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you are ready to emerge. For a long time it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the grey promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled, and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again, with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm. For your soul senses the world that awaits you. I went for a walk in the woods, in Acorn Wood, on the very cusp of spring, on Lady Day, one of the traditional quarter days of the year. And the sun was shining and the sky was blue, and it hasn't been that very often, so it was a lovely opportunity to go out, and I did. And I recorded me talking as I walked through the woods, and for the second time, while I've been making these videos, for some reason it didn't record at all. There was just complete blank silence. But I didn't want to lose this piece of video because it hasn't been like this really since then. Before or since, it was just a perfect moment. So I wanted you to see it, and I thought, well, I'll just talk over it and just tell you a little bit of what I was seeing at the time. So I've just come through the wood, and I'm going down the lane towards the little stream, or what I call the little stream, which, as I've told you before, is little more really than a glorified drainage channel, which varies a lot in how appealing it is, really, how much water there is in there and how much it flows. But at the moment it's quite nice. It's quite clear. You can see it's quite full. I didn't see any herons, or I saw a red kite there recently, but not this time. The water's going quite nicely over the little weir. It made lots of noise, which I'm afraid you can't hear. And just beyond the stream, you come to the big patch of wild garlic. This is where the bluebells grow as well at the right time. It's not time for them yet, but the wild garlic is there en masse. And it's so green and lush and fresh. And just here I'm looking at the leaves of the other plant which looks rather like it, which is the arum lily, or lords and ladies, which is poisonous, and it grows very, very close always for some reason to the wild garlic, and it's just the same shade of green, but the difference is, as I was just pointing out, it's got kind of long heart arrow shaped leaves, whereas the wild garlic is more of a long leaf. So it's easy to differentiate, but at the same time it's just very similar in colour, and the actual glossiness is exactly the same. You can see here I've crossed over the road into the alder car. There is some water in the car at the moment because we've had a lot of rain and it's quite mossy, and I've just walked past where the bluebells there are coming. They don't flower so well in that wood. I don't know whether there's not enough light for them, or perhaps it's a bit wet for them, but there are lots and lots and lots of leaves, so I'm hopeful that this year it'll be a haze of blue. And speaking of blue, the sky is so lovely to see, that blue sky. We haven't had very much recently at all. I love seeing the reflections as well. And there are a couple there of irises poking out of the water. I don't know whether you can see them. I haven't noticed those there in other years. I don't know how they've arrived. It's mysterious how things seem to arrive on their own sometimes. The alders looking very beautiful with light on the trunks. And all those reflections. Now walking back, just about to walk back over the heath. So I've come back up the lane and into the woodland, and here we are coming out into the open, onto the heath, which is very open at the moment because sadly it was all sprayed with Roundup. Well, not all of it, but lots of it. I know heaths have to be managed, but this was done in what I would call a very unsympathetic way. Anyway, the least said about that, the better, really. It's done now, and what will happen is that I guess the gorse won't grow back because they've sprayed all the stems and roots, but the idea is that the heather will then have a chance to grow. So we'll see whether that's true, whether that happens. And meanwhile, where the gorse is a beautiful blaze of yellow. It's just coming into its own at the moment. And as I was videoing this, you can see it was sunny because you can see how the camera has picked up all those beams of light and little rainbows, which I love. I know it's probably not technically what you want, but I love it, so I let them stay. And it just demonstrates what a glorious early spring morning it was. And in fact, the yellow of the gorse is beautiful, but there'll be even more. It'll be even fuller before too long. I can just feel that it will, because every day it gets more yellow, it gets more golden. I can't believe how closed up a lot of the blackthorn blossom still is. I think I was looking back and it was 25th of February. I did a video where I showed the first little blackthorn blossoms. I think it's not very focused there, but there's one there. And I thought they were all going to come bursting out, but we've had such a lot of cold, chilly weather and quite a bit of rain, although it's not been that wet, but wet enough, I suppose. And I think the blackthorn just thought it wasn't such a good idea after all and stayed tightly closed up. It's very pretty, just with the little dots all over it, but I'm really surprised how long it's taken. There's just one bush here where it has come out, just among the others. I don't know why. It's interesting that it would do that, because I imagine they're all the same variety and they all must get about the same amount of sun. But even on this bush there's quite a lot of buds still. I walk past this little thicket, I suppose you'd call it, every time I go to the heath, so I really do notice every little thing that changes day to day. And here's another of the bushes, and you can just see one of the branches has got its blossom open. It's just quite fascinating, really, to imagine how it chooses and decides when to do this. I don't know whether it is later this year, but it's nearly the end of March. I'd have thought it was usually earlier than this, as it would be blossoming. I don't ever remember to keep a note of it, and sometimes I think it would be a good idea, and other times I think, no, just let it happen when it happens and enjoy it when it's here, and not sort of worry about the facts and figures too much. But one day now, very soon, I think, it's just on that little verge, and I think one of these days I'll come along here and the whole thing will be opened out into an absolute riot. And now we come to the second part of the story about how I came to the old shop. This is a quick recap on the last video, which you can watch if you want to see a little bit more of the first part. But this was my wedding day, and this was my husband, who I sadly lost on Christmas Day 2016 after a really horrible illness. I had lost my soulmate, I'd lost my son before this, and my house was sold. I had nowhere to go, and I lost my income and my livelihood as well, because we were a partnership together. I managed to clear out our house, and I'd found a cottage just a couple of miles away that I could rent for the winter, which was not easy, but I found a beautiful fishing lake. It was in fact down the lane that used to be an old clay pit, and I just adopted it as my place to go every day, more or less, with my coffee. And I used to go and sit there on one of the jetties, and it was wonderful. It was such a solace while I was looking at other houses, and one at a time losing them. But the lake was a joy, and it turned from winter into spring, and then the lake was going to close, but I kept going there and enjoying my coffee, and the fish became more active, and one day the lake was closed. And to cut a long story short, a very kind person saw me waiting outside the wire and cut me a key, so I could continue to go to the lake when nobody else was there, and it was the most magical time. Meanwhile, I went to look at other cottages. I realised I needed to find something that I could put my own stamp on, and they were actually few and far between, and nothing was really coming up at all. So I just consoled myself with my time at the lake and kept looking and looking. And eventually, through a series of strange coincidences really, these house estate agent details, which you can see here, came into my hands. I hadn't intended to look at this cottage at all. I'd known it was for sale, but for lots of reasons I didn't think it was for me. It was the old shop, and I actually went to look at it, and as soon as I went to look at it, I fell in love. And here's a photograph of the day I went to view. These are the outbuildings. Outside it was daunting. There was an outhouse, you can see here, which is the roof was all falling in, being pushed in by a giant wisteria bush. That's where my caravan eventually stood. And inside the house was this old photograph of the old shop, when it was a shop, in, I guess, very early in the 20th century. You can see people wearing the clothes of the day, and a horse, and the shutters on the old shop, and there was no porch then. This is inside when I viewed. This was the actual old shop itself. It was the dining room at that point, and there is a chute in the ceiling, a little trapdoor, where I believe they used to keep things up above it and have a chute where they would put dry goods into bags. So it was all very fascinating, and just the kind of thing I like. This room would have been the storeroom for the shop. The shop is in front of it. I actually had that wall knocked out, so I've now got one big kitchen. This is the sitting room, and it had a picture rail, which is now not there, and a repro Victorian fire surround, which has all been knocked out, and I have a wood burner in there now. This is the bathroom, and I have a shower in the corner there. There was no space for a shower because of the space of it, so lots of things have changed there. And in the kitchen there was a door, you can see there, that isn't there now because it went out into a little yard. The staircase was still the same staircase. It's actually still got the same paint on it at the moment, but I knocked out all those banister things. That's the estate agent's arm, you can see in the picture. And you can see from the kitchen there, looking back into the kind of storeroom, that there was a wall there, and it looks lovely that there was an old Rayburn, but actually inside it had rusted away to nothing. So it's quite a lot different just there now. To cut a very, very long story short, there was a traditional builder, supposedly, who had been looking at the other houses, was a friend of my original estate agent, and he was been going to help me renovate the other houses. He suddenly got in touch to say that he had been running a Facebook promotion where people could nominate someone in need to be given a free renovation, and he'd closed the competition and chosen me. So it seemed too good to be true, and indeed it was too good to be true, as we'll discover later down the line. And it also meant that I had very little autonomy over how the money was spent that I was spending, because it wasn't free, and also what they spent it on, how they spent it, and I really lost all control of the project right from the start. They even banned me from my own house for the first 3 weeks. And loads of things went wrong, but we'll come to that as we go along. Anyway, suffice to say for now, that's how it started. And I was going to live in a caravan, which I bought from a friend of a friend, in the garden for the 8 to 12 weeks it would take for the renovation to take place. So eventually, after these 3 weeks that I'd been banned, I hung up the key, as I'd promised the person who cut it for me, and arrived at the caravan. Here I am on the very morning I arrived. It wasn't as simple as that. I'm cutting it down very, very short, but I was elated. I was close to the sea, and that was a real solace to me. And in all seasons, it was not an easy time. I had no facilities in the caravan. I didn't even have electric light. I used candles. This is in the outbuilding, which I had as a kitchen and a bathroom, and cooked on one ring for what turned out to be 18 months. You can see what the conditions were like. It was cold in the winter. I had a little fan heater, which was very expensive. I had a shower with no curtain that leaked everywhere, a toilet that leaked. This was the sink, and no hot water, so I had to boil a kettle for everything, for washing myself and washing up, obviously. They're my supplies. I still cooked good food on my one ring. This was the bathroom, inverted commas, so there was a toilet, and this was where the shower was. And it still looks very much like that now, apart from there's no shower there anymore, but we'll come on to that. That's my contact lens and toothbrush equipment, and this is the shower mat. It just became completely mouldy because there was no way of keeping the water in the shower. This was my little caravan, which I became very, very fond of, and here's me outside my little caravan. And here's where I slept. I just slept on one side of the bed rather than making up the big double bed. It was very, very cosy. And again, when the building work got too much, I could go to the sea, although I found myself feeling I shouldn't, because I wasn't doing what I should be, which was basically nothing, because they didn't really let me get involved. Here we are in the house while it was all going on, and it just dragged on for weeks and weeks and weeks. They ripped out the tank, ripped out the radiators, ripped out the windows, ripped out the floors, which I always had a contention with because they were beautiful old floorboards, and then it all became unstable, so they had to pull out the fire chimney breast upstairs. More and more holes were being made. They brought these floorboards in, which were not proper floorboards, and I said were not good enough. They didn't believe me until one of the other builders agreed that they weren't good enough. They pulled out the kitchen, and when the new kitchen came in, the people took it away again because they said it wasn't in good enough condition to even leave it there. All the glass was out of the windows for weeks and weeks and weeks. Very often nobody turned up to do anything, or when they did something which had to be redone because the person had done it wrongly. Here's the outside in my yard with no glass in the windows, no glass in anything else. 4 of them, different people, put their feet through the ceiling. So the lovely old ceiling of the old shop itself had to be replastered, which I hadn't wanted. A little sunflower found its way, just one little seed, found its way just outside my caravan. I didn't plant this, it happened by itself, and I watched it grow through the summer. It gave me great solace. I used to do yoga. There's my yoga mat and coffee cup and my little tablet. I used to find a space to do yoga. Eventually I had a little break. I went to visit my daughter in Brighton, and I had an absolutely fantastic time. But not long after I got back, just a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, I suppose, one day the builders took their stuff on a Friday evening and didn't come back on Monday. I just felt that they wouldn't. I could feel what was happening, and they'd abandoned the project. It was the 3rd of December that they left, and they'd been so keen to make sure I didn't have to spend another Christmas on my own, as my husband had died on Christmas Day. So this is how the house looked when they'd abandoned it. Of course, it's a longer story than I'm telling you here, but you are seeing what had happened after they left. It was just like this. I had a few £1,000s left, nowhere near enough to finish the project. And I didn't really know what to do. They'd been going to do all of it, and now I had to find ways of finishing it, finding different people to do different things with the tiny amount of money that I had left. This is the garden, the back of the outbuildings, and this is inside one of the outbuilding where a lot of my stuff had been stored that wasn't in storage and wasn't at my mum's house. This is behind the outbuildings as well. They had at one point been able to renovate the garden within the budget as well and get it landscaped, but that had all gone by this time it had all gone by the wayside. They'd started to block in under the stairs here to make a cupboard that was never finished. The floorboards, as you can see, were still in the kitchen. This is all after they had gone. Sorry, I'm a bit emotional just looking at it. There's my router for my Wi-Fi and the builder's kettle. And these are the kitchen cupboards on the left, just covered with dust sheets because it has never been finished. The kitchen people have refused to come back to finish fitting it until it was further advanced. This is the meter cupboard, not boxed in. And here's another view of the kitchen. It then later transpired that the kitchen, although I'd paid for the kitchen, this had never been paid for, and the kitchen people wanted me to pay £7,500, which was eventually, thanks to some kind friends intervening, was eventually written off. This is, as you can see, the soil pipe in the bathroom. The bathroom was never finished. Sorry, it's a bit depressing, but you'll see that it does get better. The shower tray was put in the wrong place, as you'd have had to step right into it. The porch had been started, but they'd actually put it felt on wrongly, so the water would actually have drained right into the porch. But I had my little caravan garden showing me what was possible in the future. And as well as that, I always had the solace of the sea. So next time, I'll tell you what happened after that, after the builders had gone and I was left alone to work out what to do next. It's been drizzling on and off all day, but I really wanted to show you the front garden. So we're here, and it's actually looking quite interesting, I suppose, in the wet, because it heightens all the colours. So I'm really proud of what I've done, if I say it myself, because the back garden needs a lot of work, should we say, but I find the little space in the front here much more possible to get to grips with and know what I want to do with it. I think with me, knowing what to do with things is half the problem. And here, what I had was a space which, what had happened last year, I think late summertime, a large animal, I don't know what the animal was, but I think that's what it must have been, came in and dug up all the front garden here, and you couldn't even see the paving slabs, and it mixed all the, I say it, he or she, mixed all the shells that were there, been down for I don't know, a couple of years now, mixed with wood chip, and everything was just everywhere. So it's been left more or less like that over the winter. But what I've done is I got sent for some more shell, and this is cockle shell, which is actually a byproduct of the shellfish industry. So I'm kind of at ease with it as a thing to use. I know everyone has to use their own judgment, but I actually like to use things that would otherwise be thrown away. I think it actually shows respect to the life that was in these shells once upon a time, although I wouldn't eat them myself at all. So that's my viewpoint on it, and I like them in this garden because we're not far from the sea. The thing I do need to do is to get some big stones like there are at the end here, some pebbles and just try and line the edges here so there's a bit more. I mean, the edge is fine at the moment because I've just done it, but it won't stay quite as neat as this, which is fine because I don't need a really, really neat garden, but you know, I thought it would look quite nice with the pebbles. So let's start at the beginning again. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. At the moment, I know you can see a lot of wood chip. I've been putting down some of the old wood chip, which is kind of partly composted now, that was in the pile. I had some last year. So I just put some down around the plants to try and give them a little bit of, doesn't give much nutrition, but it'll give a little bit of nutrition to them, and it just neatens it up a little bit and evens out the contours, because it was a bit up and down where it's been dug up. So what's happening now, which is quite exciting, is that everything is coming up, and even in the last few days you can see things coming up. And the tulips, there are 2 or 3 kinds of tulips, and they are so lovely because they just do it by themselves. I haven't planted any this year, but here they are. There's one kind there, and we'll see some fat ones as we go around, which will be different ones. I can't remember what they are till they come out, which is quite always joy when you have a surprise yourself. This is the little hazel tree, which is all leafed up, as you can see, and the willows have as well. I still haven't woven them into an archway, although I think you maybe or more or less could this year. I'm not quite sure how to though, so I'm going to have to look that one up. You can see in the bird bath here, you can just see it's raining a bit, but it's only quite light rain, so we'll plough on. And this is one of my favourites, which is a fritillary, a snake's head fritillary, just coming out. I haven't planted anything this year. These are all plants that have just come through the winter and come up again. There's one of the fat tulips. I think it might be a white and green one, but I'm not sure. And the hellebores, which I took the old leaves off, which was after a tip by one of the lovely people who watched my last video, and all the leaves were looking a bit unhappy because they were the old ones, you know, this had come through the winter, and it makes all the difference. You can see the flowers so much better as well without those big old leaves getting in the way. And another one at the back there as well, and you can see all these various plants which are going to spread out, and you won't be able to see all this wood chip again pretty soon now, because some of them are mint like this. You know how rampant mint is. Once it gets going, it'll cover the whole area. And the other little hazel tree is just there. Here's the pond. I have cleared it out. Maybe it could do with a little bit more. I can see a few more old leaves in there. The trouble is with putting it under trees is not really ideal because, well, for obvious reasons, it can get clogged up with old leaves, but I'm just trying to be mindful of it, and I shall have another go at taking out the ones that are floated up there now. I'm hoping to get some more frog spawn this year, which I don't think is too far away the time to go and look for it. I'll probably go and have a look where I found some last year in the not too distant future. It's just really nice to see everything leafing up. The roses here as well. And this is the viburnum, that stayed green all through the winter anyway. But everything really is, and there's the aquilejas. They've sprung up like anything in the last few days, and you can see all this lovely new growth on the roses. That's the Emily Bronte, named after it wasn't named after my lovely daughter, but I got it because it was called Emily, and that's why I wanted that one particularly. And you can see the difference with the 2 sorts of tulips there. There's that one with the pointed flower, and there's the one with the more rounded egg-shaped flower, which will be coming out, I don't know really, but I should be keeping an eye on them anyway. And that's the Alchemilla, which is all coming up with its lovely little drops of water. Well, it keeps its drops of water even if it's not raining, but obviously it keeps getting more drops of water on it at the moment, the way things are. Dogwoods, and the Sprite Child is very wet and looking quite green, but quite serene as usual. And the frog also, you can see his green is showing up quite well. Still there from when my grandmother painted him, I don't know, decades ago, because she's not been with us since 1993, and I don't suppose she was painting him, you know, just before that, because she was 90 when she died. So just everything really. It's all just happening at once. Here's the clematis. You can see all the new growth on that, and the rose climbing up. What else can we look at? There's the fennel, bronze fennel, again shooting up a lot in the last few days. The stones look nice when they're wet. We've got the dragon stone there that came from, I think it actually came from Kynance Cove, but it came from the Lizard in Cornwall anyway, where the serpentine is. And the devil's stone here, as I call this one, came from the Stiper stones in Shropshire, the devil's chair, or near the devil's chair. I think we're coming up really back round to the gate again. There's lots of plants that I've put the same plant in different places so that they repeat, so it's not everything different, and some of them are happier than others, so they still are there everywhere, like the Japanese anemones here, which are very hardy. There are some of those in all corners of the garden, I think. There's another, that tulip is pretty close to coming out. You can see the colour of it. I think it is a sort of whitey greeny one. It'll be lovely when the roses come out. Obviously that's quite a long way away yet, but you can see the promise with all this lovely new growth. And the water just dripping off the eaves. I think it's probably time to go in now, but I just wanted to show you, and especially while it is still looking like this. I like seeing it freshly done like this, but of course it'll be lovely when it all spreads out and you won't see the wood chip at all anymore. You'll just see, well, if everything goes well anyway, it'll all spread out and cover. I think it will, because there are lots of these are plants that really like to spread, like the geraniums are very, very, they like to get their feet under the table and then they romp away. So yeah, it's raining a little bit more now, so I think we'll call that a day, but we'll come back of course and see it in due course when things have grown even more.